Um, I, Benjamin David Nunn, on the 30th of October 2023 at 21:44, make the following statement of truth, and I declare to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, the whole truth, before Almighty God. Um, so this is my impact statement. So this is really about the personal and physical and mental harms, as well as abuse that I've suffered over the past 15 months. And I link this immediately to monkeypox and having to wait for a first payment of universal credit between the pretty much the 31st of May until the 8th or 10th of August 2022. And also in the personal independence payment process, the two being linked. When I started my claim for universal credit, I was aged 34, which meant that I was only entitled to the shared accommodation rate, and meant I received a total income of £851 per month, which I believe is about £10,200 per year. I believe a student living cost to be £10,800 per year. And I believe that the national living wage is more than that, as provided in evidence. And I believe that the real living wage for London is about £22,000. So, rightfully, I have assessed that at starting my universal credit claim, I was in receipt of half of the amount required to live. I made various applications for discretionary housing payment, for personal independence payment, but this was a lot of form filling in. There are a lot of delays. It's still going on, and for discretionary housing payment, I still need to top up every 3 months. As a person with ADHD, one of the symptoms and treatments is hypermobility. And what that means is I have a lot of energy and I need to expend it, but it also means that I spend a lot of my time anxious, and I believe I have general anxiety disorder and depression, which means I spend a lot of my time pacing, walking, exercising. Upon diagnosis, I've taken a lot of actions. So in November last year, I signed up to Everyone Active, which was my local gym, and progressively, I've been improving my exercises as exercise is progressive. And what this has actually done is increase my calorie intake to around 5,000 calories per day, or up to. And that's because I walk everywhere, because I don't always have access to public transport because my income doesn't allow it. It's also because it's recognised, so yoga, cardio, and aerobics, that's muscular, running, walking, exercises, seem to be good deal, not only with depression, but with generalised anxiety disorder and ADHD. And it's recommended that you do about an hour a day. I often do way more than that. In evidence, I've shown you how many times I go to the gym, which is a lot. It's almost every day that I physically can. Add on top of that the walking, which could be up to 40,000 steps per day, which is 4 times the 10,000 steps that is normally required. And you can see how the calorie requirements add up. And I also used to do a lot of running and interval training. So my fastest time for 10 kilometers is about 48 minutes, which is really good. But I can't do that due to musculoskeletal problems. I think in the latter part of last year, I spoke to my GP, Dr. Shimona Gale, Dr. Lou, and the practice lead about pains in my knee. They referred me for physio. I then developed problems with my shoulders and arms because I was doing a lot of movement. I was then referred again for physiotherapy, and I was supposed to go to 2 appointments, but I got so much on, I just couldn't do it. I've also had a lot of problems with my feet, with a lot of dead skin build-up, and that's because I haven't been able to buy the shoes I need to be able to run and walk in, work in, etc. And these are quite expensive because if At the moment, my ambition or goal is to become a personal trainer. So I count what I'm wearing as my safety equipment. As my, having a pair of shoes that are not broken prevent injury to my feet. Um, and I've spent the last couple of weeks with a pedicure device, just removing skin every day. That's the level of injury. The other thing with ADHD is that dopamine also helps control the body movement. So I provided some evidence in photos, which are best seen in colour, to be honest with you, of the harm that can do. So there's something called centre of balance. So with ADHD, when you get up to move or you start moving, you're not always in balance. So like for me, I was never able to catch a ball. Sports were actually my worst subject in school. I was quite academic and booky. And it means that when I've been cycling or walking about, I've ended up with like bumps to my head, bruises on my legs, damage to my feet. It also means that I count things like yoga, which are very simple stretching, slow breathing movements, as a way of coordinating the body, because I can't physically do that properly. That is a symptom. And so, I haven't had access to public transport costing the entire amount of money I'm allocated per day as a travel card. I tried to get a job centre discounted card, but I couldn't find a location to purchase an Oyster card because I don't have bank cards. I use my phone for payments, and there was nowhere that would accept an Apple Pay payment. I've also lost or had stolen 2 or 3 bikes, which are reported to the police. At the moment, I don't have one. What I have is a Santander cycle. But I live in Peckham, and there are no Santander cycle stands there, so I have to use what's called Line Bike. And that is my primary mode of transport. I can't afford a car. I can't afford the insurance or anything like that, so I can only walk or cycle. And that makes things like going for a food shop really difficult. So when I do a food shop at the moment, I have it delivered because it saves a half-hour round trip to Morrison's and Lidl, which are the nearest supermarkets to me. And I can do that for as little as £2.49 on supermarket prices via Tesco Whoosh. Bearing in mind that my calorie requirement is 2 times the required, and I'm also required to produce bodily results. And that may seem odd to be claiming a disability benefit and being hypermobile, but I simply point to Paralympians who are fully state supported, have recognised needs, and represent Britain across the world with many forms of disability, from intellectual down to missing limbs. I also, on social media, follow accounts with people with everything from cerebral palsy to people who are paralysed and now compete in triathlons. So my attitude to disability is very progressive. What limits me is an attitude where I should be showing up to a food bank. It is essential not only for my depression, anxiety, ADHD, but also my HIV, that I eat a balanced, good diet, that I have reasonable control of that. I also adjusted my diet to be more vegan as I couldn't afford meat. And I've also provided a spreadsheet which demonstrates the cost today of a war rations food budget, as well as some very limited selection of toiletries. In the war, back in World War II, there was only soap available, so people used to make their own laundry powder. But I'm going to say this is written in the 21st century, and I think we have, deodorants, shower gels, hair gel, that kind of thing is reasonable to have, and I provided that from a set of supermarkets. And what that demonstrated is that it is not possible to obtain a war ration on universal credit and pay your rent. And I think it's really important to highlight here that when I talk about my needs as a human, it's already recognised in the personal independence regulations I'm applying for that if you have a disability, it is about your requirements and needs. So if I'm walking around with bumps on my head, bruises on my legs, scratches, cuts, I don't know if you can see in this purple light actually, which elbow is it on? But there is an injury there. Maybe if I come out of it for a second. Ooh, ow, just banged my head. Classic. Is it there? No, you can't really see it this light. But in short, I have all of these physical injuries and physio injuries resulting from a lack of coordination. So I might look quite fit, but actually that's been years of work through yoga. Since last October, November, working in the gym. That has also been between May and April last year. I went from 84 kilos to 68, which is that's actually more. I said like 16 kilos. So I'm now back at 82. And I could only do that by using my full entitlement and living as if I was at the national living wage. I've also submitted evidence to the lower tribunal to say that there is a higher risk of lipodystrophy, which is fat distribution. There is a higher risk of liver disease, cancer disease, as a result of the medications I take. Some of them have higher risks of blood pressure changes, which requires me to moderate my water and salt intake. Methylphenidate requires me to adjust both my water intake, but also carries a risk of, pressure and changes on the heart. So being very strict with my diet and having free choice is a requirement and need. And, trying to live to minimum standard on welfare, I used to volunteer on an app called Olio, which is basically you collect food waste from supermarkets and redistribute it to communities via an app on a mobile phone. I collected croissants and pastries from Tesco, which were my primary diet for 2 weeks. No one else wanted them, so and I couldn't afford food. On Christmas Eve, I went to Tesco and I collected their food waste and got 2 bags worth of microwave meals. And on Christmas Day, I ate a microwave pasta meal because I was too exhausted and dilapidated to meet with my family. I couldn't afford anything to eat. And it got to a point last March where I said, you know what, I need to prioritise my health. And it's taken a number of months, if we go from April to date, 6 months, to get my weight back to 82 kilograms. And I still need to, to get back to the baseline of where I was in May, I need to gain 2 kilograms more. And that's eating both eating for 5,000 calories a day, including, doing that in the cheapest way possible, which is by eating nuts and supplementing my diet with protein shakes. During this time, I did have agency work and I worked on a cancer ward. And on a cancer ward, we used to serve patients who couldn't eat the similar protein drinks that I have had to substitute for my diet, because it's the cheap, a liquid diet of pea protein, coconut sugar and flavouring for £1.30 to obtain 500 calories. That covers all basic nutritional needs, including vitamins. It's the easiest way, and that's, what I've been reduced to. I don't have running water in my property that I was in because I couldn't afford a repair to the leak, and my relationship with my landlord isn't positive, as they're currently under they've given me a Section 21 notice and applied through court, and I can't change that fact. So I spent weeks where I couldn't flush the toilet, and I used things like Evian, Tesco mineral water, Sainsbury's mineral water, Volvic, Highland Spring once a week to flush the excrement and piss in my toilet, where I couldn't go to a pub because it was too late at night, or where I just needed to go. I did my washing in the local tap fountain outside the public toilets in Peckham Rye Park to clean my utensils. There is currently a washing basin full of stuff I can't wash up because I couldn't afford the £550 to repair the water. I also couldn't afford the water bill either, or the gas bill, or the electric bill, without deprioritising what is my health, what is my body, what is required in terms of the food and nutrition I need to intake with, because as clearly said, my weight reached 68 kilograms from 84. Because paying all the bills and being timely with everything, I may have helped out the telephone company, the gas and electric company, but I was on my way to starving to death. And I cannot just sit at home doing nothing. I am a young, active person with a disability. That means I'm not in a wheelchair, but if I was in a wheelchair, I'd be cycling there. I'd be pushing myself around everywhere because I'd need to move. I'd be the next, Johnny Peacock or whatever with a, with a missing limb. And that's the other element is, my diagnosis for ADHD came when I was 34 years old. And it's something that I will have had since childhood. And separating and unboxing that and being able to identify years of behaviors which were no longer kind of bad working practices, not showing up to work on time, unboxing that whilst facing homelessness and being starved on half the national average, half of the national living standard, a third of the national average wage is a lot. If I was a child and diagnosed with that at age 5 or 6, I would have been given years of extra additional support through SEN. So I was a governor at a special educational needs school in Lewisham. And I love children and people with my condition. We can immediately get on. It's harder for me to get on with other people because they think I'm disruptive, rude, talk too much, all of the symptoms that I can't integrate, that I'm different, special. I've been called special before, disruptive, rude, arrogant, noisy. By the time a child with ADHD is 10, they will have received something like 10,000, 100,000 extra negative pieces of feedback, and those feedback items stick with you. They're like little stick-it notes on your forehead that someone's constantly throwing at you. So to unbox that come age 34 and treat it with just a pill when some of the problems are behavioural, some of the problems are as simple as going to the gym, is quite difficult. There's also an investment. So I've given the clinical guidelines which state that things like yoga, going to the gym, I find swimming really important too, because that helps de-stress all of the aches and pains from the gym. Yoga also stretches and relaxes my body because I'm under so much stress every day from emotional dysregulation, from having to conform to something that physically I cannot do. Humorously, I describe it as being permanently on permanently in PMS. It's very hormonal and emotional disability because you never get any reward that's dopamine, and you're constantly feeling exaggerated emotions. So, like, anger is like a rage, an uncontrollable rage. Love is like an uncontrollable attachment. Attraction can look like uncontrolled lust. And on top of that, I suffer from things like body dysmorphia. So every time I look at my body, it's different. And so, like, recently, I've become quite fascinated with the development of muscle and changes in my body as a result of exercise, which has progressively improved things. But this comes from a basis of being bottom in the class for PE at school. So my baseline was really low. And so, like, I've only ever had a couple of hours of personal training with a personal trainer. I've used apps. I've used, it's been quite a journey. And when I left university and lived with my parents, my weight spiraled to 106 kilograms, I think, or 103, 103, 106 kilograms, which is quite hefty. And all of that was fat. So I was obese. It's gone down to 68 and it's been everywhere in between. Um, and I've never really been taught to see myself as attractive or confident. I'm a gay individual and came out really in 2012. I didn't receive a decent sex education. I was raped in 2012 by a gang of men, which I've recently reported to the police for the purposes of this court. So I've relived the trauma of that. I reported a different rape where I was held down and raped by 3 men. Or not raped, sorry. I was raped by 1 and the other 2 held me down. And I've also reported instances of where people have removed condoms without consent, where I've received, sexually transmitted infections without ever being notified, where I've asked people to stop and they haven't. And that comes from a long culture of not providing children with the sex education they need. My sex education as a gay man was restricted to procreation in a straight relationship plus the AIDS crisis, not natural loving relationships. And one of the most profound difficulties I've had over the past year living on that income is forming social relationships, going on dates, forming new relationships, having the confidence to not feel really sad to tell someone, I'm sorry, I can't even afford a coffee. Out of everything, I think that's been the toughest. Because it has led to friends no longer maintaining their relationship with me. I've been seen as quite needy. It's led to massive rows with my family because I can't afford anything and nor can they. It's really the one thing that has left my mental health in tatters. I don't need a therapist. I need friendships. And maintaining friendships sometimes does require going for a coffee, getting tickets to an exhibition. I wasn't able to go to Pride this year because of all the stuff that was going on that was quite stressful. I wasn't able to go to any festivals or events. It's all completely out of reach. And as a personal impact, it it leaves you hating humanity a little bit because I can't do anything. Sorry. I've tried to start setting appointments. I tried with Gorillas, who are a home delivery app in their warehouse. I've worked as an agency worker, but have been struck off because I was unable to reach certain things on time because I didn't have transport. I would forget the start times of things. I'm going to talk about that quickly. Forgetfulness is a symptom of ADHD, and it can have really profound. Sometimes it's verbal aphasia. So I'll forget the word for something, and then 2 weeks later, or a day later, or 2 weeks later, suddenly remember what word it was. Other impacts could be, so when I was applying for graduate jobs, I applied to Deloitte, and I applied to two divisions. I applied to their consultancy division and their tax division. And in the interview, they asked me, what does Deloitte do? And I said, well, they do accountancy, auditing, consulting. And they said, what's the last thing? And I couldn't remember. And it was tax, which is one of the things that I had applied for. And they obviously didn't take me through to the next stage. But that's a real tangible impact of something as simple as forgetfulness and, you know, what kind of adjustments someone might need to make. It's like I always remember 70, 80, 90% or something, but I need to de-stress and feel less anxious, which means changing the conversation and understanding that sometimes I won't remember the specifics or I'll simply need a prompt. I've missed my appointments. Twice in the past year, I've had to stop taking my HIV medication because I've lost contact with it. That could have devastating consequences, and I worry about it every day. It also makes me very fearful and ashamed to start any form of romantic or sexual attachment because it involves very different and difficult discussions sometimes. I felt so stressed about, holding a conversation with someone. When you talk to people about, waiting for PIP or being made homeless, these aren't positive, progressive discussions. And some people just say to me, why don't you get a job? And I go, well, I've held several this year, and actually I can't hold it down whilst I'm constantly worried about where I'm going to live. Waiting for a bailiff to show up at my front door, aggravating all of my symptoms, missing medication, feeling forgetful, hopeless, organising any number of forms of paperwork. On top of the emotional dysregulation. And the most significant impact it's had this year is to my senses. So stressors can be as simple as a siren from an ambulance. It can be, certain triggers that take me back to those scenes of rape that happened quite recently, where I was dragged across the floor in a hotel and the police had to be called because I was having a panic attack. Another time I lost track of where I was and threw away my glasses to try and shake off the attack. I think I would have been through that. But these things can't get better until I have a solid foundation in a home, or I can know for the next couple of months what's happening. And I can't do that right now. And it's nothing I control. It's waiting for court dates. It's waiting